I know of many cases where the main suspect is a very cynical, dangerous, and cruel person. But to be honest, this case made a much bigger impression on me than all the others. A guy from Northern Ireland named Stephen was so deranged that he staged an unbelievable murder of his pregnant girlfriend. On December 18th, 2022, 32-year-old Natalie McNally from Northern Ireland was stabbed to death in her home in Lurgan, County Armagh. Her boyfriend, Stephen McCullagh, who initially claimed he was live streaming on his YouTube channel at the time of the murder, was found guilty of her murder in March 2026 and later sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 31 years. The circumstances of the attack sparked widespread public outcry across Northern Ireland. The guy made a fake stream on YouTube, and later forensics would find that it was actually a recording he posted as a live stream. During that time, he went to his girlfriend's house and brutally murdered her. Unfortunately, she didn't have a chance of being saved. But let's break down this case from the very beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and watch this video until the end. In August 2022, Natalie McNally first connected with Stephen McCullagh through the Bumble app, and soon after, they began a romantic relationship. In November 2022, McNally told her family that she was pregnant with Stephen's child. On the evening of December 19, 2022, at around 10 o'clock p.m., officers from the police service in Northern Ireland were called to a house on Silverwood Green in Lurgan, where they discovered the body of 32-year-old Natalie. Subsequent autopsy revealed that, in addition to multiple stab wounds, McNally, who was 15 weeks pregnant at the time, had been brutally beaten and suffered several fractures to her facial bones and cervical vertebrae. Detectives found no signs of forced entry in the house, which suggests that Natalie knew her killer and let them in herself. A 32-year-old man was detained at the scene, but he was released the next day after being cleared of suspicion. Detectives investigating Natalie's death determined that she watched the 2022 World Cup final with her parents in Craigavon and then returned to her home in Lurgan sometime after 5 o'clock p.m. After analyzing footage from local surveillance cameras, the police released images showing a person acting suspiciously near her house on the day she was last seen alive. The footage shows a man with a backpack, whom detectives believe to be the killer, entering the Silverwood Green area at 8:52 on December 18th and leaving at 9:30. On January 31st, 2023, the Northern Ireland police announced that they had rearrested the man who was initially detained on suspicion of murdering Natalie. On February 2nd, 2023, 32-year-old Stephen McCullagh from Woodland Gardens in Lisburn was charged with the murder of Natalie. In court, it was reported that Stephen was arrested shortly after her death, but was ruled out as a suspect because he appeared to have an alibi, a 6-hour live stream in which he played Grand Theft Auto Vice City on his YouTube channel that very night. A subsequent forensic examination of his digital devices determined that the live stream had been pre-recorded and broadcast as if it were happening in real time. Detectives noted that at the beginning of the video, Stephen stated he couldn't interact in the chat with his 37,000 subscribers due to technical issues, and that throughout the recording, he repeatedly mentioned the supposed current time, which investigators believe was an attempt to reinforce the timeline of his alibi. Chief Inspector of the Northern Ireland Police, Neil McGuinness, told the court that during interrogations, McCullagh admitted the video was recorded around December 14th, 2022. McGuinness also stated that after Stephen was excluded from the list of suspects, he refused to cooperate in certain aspects of the investigation, including providing a statement describing the scene at the time of his arrival before the medics got there. In addition, he told the court that surveillance camera footage showed a witness, the taxi driver, and that the lack of activity on Stephen's mobile phone from 6 o'clock to 11:16 on the night of Natalie's death is linked to her murder. What Stephen's motive was is unknown. Maybe he had pathological jealousy, maybe his girlfriend was cheating on him, or maybe Stephen really had some kind of mental disorder. I didn't find any details about that, and Stephen didn't comment on it in any way. But I think that everything here is related to jealousy. During the court session on February 17, 2023, Stephen's lawyers stated that the murder charge against him was based on a discrepancy related to a live video game stream. The defense attorney stated that McCullagh, who denied killing Natalie, admitted that the video on his YouTube channel had been pre-recorded, but insisted that on that day he was drinking at home and fell asleep around the time the murder was committed. Prosecutor Natalie Pinkerton urged the court to deny bail, arguing that strong and compelling prima facie evidence had been established and that McCullagh had demonstrated significant premeditation and deceit by orchestrating an elaborate hoax in the form of a live stream to create an alibi. Pinkerton informed the court that surveillance footage from a bus in Dunmary captured a masked individual matching Stephen's physical description heading to Lurgan, where at around 9 p.m., two of McNally's neighbors heard her screams. Shortly after that, a taxi driver picked up a passenger near a bar on Carnegie Street and drove him to Stephen's house in Lisburn. Later, during a police identification procedure, the driver identified this man as Stephen. The court also found that the next day, Stephen went to Natalie's house, reported her death to the police, and suggested that she had been stalked by a former partner in the previous weeks. Pinkerton also noted that during a gaming session, Stephen deliberately chose an additional side mission called Was the Wife. In this mission, the player must kill a woman and stage her death as an accident. The prosecution argued that this was intended as an Easter egg to mock Natalie's family. The defense attorneys insisted that the case against their client was based solely on circumstantial evidence, and that the timing of the mission coinciding with McNally's alleged time of death was a tragic coincidence. On January 12, 2024, Stephen officially pleaded not guilty to the murder of McNally. On November 3, 2025, Stephen's attorney John Kearney secured a postponement of the trial after hundreds of new documents were revealed during pre-trial discovery. Judge O'Hara granted the motion for a postponement after learning that up to 30,000 additional pages of materials might ultimately be provided to the defense. Essentially, there were many precursors that could be considered evidence of guilt. But a separate topic for discussion is his alibi, specifically a pre-recorded stream on YouTube. I don't even want to know how he thought of that, since he was developing this plan for so long. He's truly a psychopath. And also, personally, I was interested in this detail. A mission called Lost the Wife was involved in the game, which refers us to the crime. This can really be considered as yet another piece of evidence that Stephen was determined. On February 16, 2026, before Judge Patrick Kinney, a jury of 6 men and 6 women was sworn in to hear Stephen's case. Addressing the issue of prior media coverage of the case, Judge Kinney instructed the jurors to base their decisions solely on the evidence presented in court and warned them against conducting any independent research. He also informed them that the trial was expected to last about 5 weeks. Later, the Public Prosecution Service described his case as unprecedented in the legal history in Northern Ireland due to the deliberate extent of deception and concealment of facts, as well as the truly extraordinary meticulousness in planning the murder of this young woman. On February 23rd, the prosecution lawyer, Charles McCreaner, King's Counsel, told the jury that Stephen called 999 from Natalie's house at around 10:00 p.m. on Monday, December 19th, 2022, and a recording of that call was played in court. When police officers and paramedics arrived at the scene, they found Natalie lying in a pool of blood, while Stephen, who was clearly in a state of distress, was trying to perform CPR on her. Natalie had 3 stab wounds to her neck and additional lacerations on the top of her head, and a subsequent examination revealed that her death was also caused by manual strangulation. McCullagh was the father of her unborn child. The prosecution argued that the murder was planned, calculated, and deliberate, and that Stephen was the sole perpetrator. The prosecution claimed that he traveled from his home in Lisburn to Lurgan by public transport and changed his clothes and appearance along the way to avoid being recognized. After being rearrested, Stephen admitted that the video had been pre-recorded and uploaded to YouTube on December 18th, but claimed that he had consumed a large amount of alcohol and then fell asleep at home. When he was asked about the taxi that arrived at his house that night, he claimed that the person he called the real killer of Natalie had deliberately left a trail of circumstantial evidence to frame him for her murder. Paramedic Graham Thompson testified that he was the first to arrive at the scene and noticed that Natalie's hands and lips had turned blue. Constable Archibald told the court that upon arrival she noticed an unpleasant smell in the house, and Constable Philly stated that he found a knife a few feet from Natalie's body in the living room, where there were traces of blood on the floor and walls. Although Dr. Lyons could not determine a single definitive cause of death, he stated that both the stab wounds and the injuries caused by compression of the neck could have been fatal on their own, and that Natalie had been subjected to a prolonged attack. The prosecution also read out WhatsApp messages exchanged between Natalie and Stephen. Detective Constable Matthews from the Cybercrime Unit of the Northern Ireland Police told the court that materials seized from Stephen's computer indicated that the video broadcast on December 18th was not a live stream. He noted that the OBS studio program didn't record any background activity during breaks in the program, which would have been impossible during a real live broadcast. Maybe in Stephen's head it was the perfect alibi, but in fact, it's a very stupid idea. First of all, there are no such technical problems that limit you in communicating with your own audience. Otherwise, why even start a stream if you can't read what your own viewers are writing to you? The main feature of a live stream, compared to a recording, is that you communicate with your audience. Secondly, let's not forget that during a stream, streamers often have some trashy or funny situations, but here, everything was different. According to his testimony, on December 14th, a single 6-hour recording was created, saved in the early hours of December 15th, and then manually deleted shortly after midnight on December 19th. He added that the analysis of digital evidence did not reveal any user interaction with the computer at any time between 6:00 p.m. on December 18th and 12:05 a.m. on December 19th. Which once again indicates that the broadcast could not have been conducted in real time. The jury was shown a compilation of surveillance camera recordings, including footage from home security cameras and from a TransLink company bus. These recordings captured the suspect riding the bus from Dunmurry to Lurgan, and then continuing on foot to the Silverwood Green area. Shortly after 9:30 p.m., the same man, now wearing different clothes, was recorded leaving the Silverwood area and getting into a taxi in downtown Lurden, which then headed to Stephen's home at Woodland Gardens in Lisburn. The jury was also shown photos taken from Stephen's Instagram account. In those photos, he was seen wearing a baseball cap under which he hid a black curly wig. The prosecutor claimed that the suspect, captured on CCTV getting into a taxi in Lurgan, was wearing a cap of the same style. In court, it was revealed how, the day after Natalie's body was discovered, Stephen was formally questioned by the police in the presence of his lawyer. His lawyer pointed out that his client was willing to cooperate as a witness, but argued that Stephen was being treated as a suspect, even though the fact of the murder had not yet been proven, and there was no evidence linking his client to the alleged incident. Therefore, he instructed Stephen to respond with no comment more than 80 times when questioned about details such as his movements and his own relationship with Natalie. Nevertheless, Stephen did tell the police that Natalie's former partner had been stalking her recently, and the accused denied any involvement in her death when directly confronted with the accusation. Natalie's parents testified in court about Stephen's behavior after her body was found, describing him as someone overwhelmed by grief who showed them the engagement ring he had bought for their daughter. As for his refusal to cooperate with the police investigating her death, Natalie Noel's father told the court that Stephen said his own lawyer had advised him not to speak to the police after he was initially considered a suspect. Natalie's mother, Bernadette, also testified that Stephen hinted that an ex-boyfriend had been stalking Natalie in the lead-up to her death. Natalie's closest neighbors, Emile Susans and Aslan Henry, each told the jury how they heard screams coming from her apartment around 9 o'clock that night. At the same time, Henry added that she saw a large shadow on the patio blinds of the house. Anne McCullagh, a longtime college friend of McCullagh, told the court that he was inconsolable with grief after Natalie's death, adding that, in her opinion, they were a good couple and that McCullagh was happy to become a father. The court also heard testimony from Stephen's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that he physically abused her several times during their 7-year on and off relationship. The woman also said that after she gave birth to a stillborn baby in early 2022, she attended private counseling sessions at Stephen's house. Later, the police informed her that he had recorded some of these sessions without her knowledge. Taxi driver Jeff McEvoy testified that on the night of Natalie's murder at 10:46 p.m., he picked up a male passenger from a pub in downtown Lurgan who then headed to his home in Lisburn. A technical examination of the taxi's GPS records showed that it stopped at Stephen's house on Woodland Gardens at 11:11 p.m. on the night in question. Even this monster's ex-girlfriend confirmed that he had problems with his head. Because, as I believe, a healthy and sensible guy will never use physical force against women, and especially against his girlfriend. And that's not even mentioning the fact that she was pregnant. Imagine how horrific that is. Natalie's ex-boyfriend, whom Stephen accused of being responsible for her murder, told the jury how they first met on Tinder in 2019, and over the next few years had an on and off relationship, with their last sexual encounter taking place at her home in October 2022. The man stated that he was arrested by police investigating Natalie's death, and that on the night in question he was watching the World Cup final with his partner at their home. During cross-examination by defense attorney John Kearney, King's counsel, the man admitted that he had recently been arrested for threatening violence against a former girlfriend in WhatsApp messages. However, he called it a pack of lies. Kearney also told the man that he had deliberately and repeatedly lied to the detectives investigating Natalie's death, claiming that he did so to prevent the police from making him the prime suspect in the murder. The man admitted that his statements were false, but said that this happened because in 2022 he had sent her several abusive emails. At the same time, he again stated that he had nothing to do with her death. When asked why he wiped all the data from his phone by doing a factory reset in the days after Natalie's body was found, the man explained that the authorities had just arrived at his home, and he had a bag of cannabis hidden in his closet. So, to prevent its possible discovery, he wanted to quickly erase any incriminating messages about recreational drugs from his phone. The court also heard testimony from the man's then-girlfriend, who said that on the night of Natalie's death, the two of them were at home watching the final of the 2022 FIFA World Cup, and the court was shown a short video of them lying on the couch with a soccer match playing on the TV. As evidence, transcripts of messages sent by Natalie to several other men in the months leading up to her death were presented, with some of them indicating that she was considering ending her relationship with Stevenson. When Stephen was given an opportunity to speak in his own defense, he exercised his right to remain silent and declined to testify or be cross-examined by the prosecution. Defense attorney John Kearney also informed the presiding judge that he would not be calling any witnesses to testify or making any statements on behalf of his client. The prosecutor told the jury that Stephen repeatedly misled a number of different people about the circumstances of Natalie's death. Defense attorney John Kearney argued that the case against his client is based on circumstantial evidence, much of which, he claimed, points not to Stephen, but to another person. Kearney told the jury that if they have any reasonable doubt that someone else killed Natalie, they must acquit Stephen. In his address to the jury, Judge Kinney said that although a significant amount of evidence regarding Natalie's former partner had been considered, he is not the person on trial, and that the jury's sole task is to determine whether Stephen is guilty of the murder. It should be noted that there is no direct evidence and that the prosecution's arguments are entirely circumstantial. The judge instructed the jury to consider each element separately and then decide whether the elements they have accepted collectively prove the prosecution's case. If so, he said, they must return a verdict of guilty. On March 23, 2026, after 2 hours of deliberation, Stephen was unanimously found guilty of murdering Natalie, while Natalie's relatives applauded from the public gallery. Stephen showed little emotion when the verdict was delivered. Judge Kinney informed Stephen that he would receive a mandatory life sentence, and that the minimum term of his imprisonment would be set at a forthcoming hearing. It was later reported that Stephen was being held in the hospital wing of Magaberry prison due to concerns that he might become the target of a revenge attack. Although Stephen's YouTube channels remained publicly accessible throughout the entire trial, they were shut down just a few hours after the verdict was announced, and a YouTube spokesperson later stated that they were removed for violating our creator responsibility policies. During the sentencing hearing on May 21, 2026, it was revealed that after Stephen was found guilty, he told a probation officer that he might have been responsible for her death, but he didn't remember anything about the night Natalie was killed. Prosecutor Charles McGrainer emphasized that, in his opinion, Stephen's contradictory statements in the pre-sentencing report were an attempt to manipulate the parole board, and he demanded a prison sentence of 27 to 35 years. Defense attorney John Kearney objected, arguing that the proposed sentence would be excessive and questioned the degree of intent Stephen allegedly showed leading up to Natalie's murder. Kearney also argued that a minimum prison term of 15 to 16 years would be more appropriate. After that, the judge postponed the proceedings to the next hearing. On June 3, 2026, Stephen was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years. Judge Patrick Kearney noted that Stephen showed a high degree of guilt by creating an alibi in the form of a live broadcast on his YouTube channel, adding that he knew she was pregnant at the time and that his brutal and insane attack would also lead to the death of her unborn child, who was to be named Dean. Stephen showed no emotion as the sentence was handed down. I'm not ruling out that Natalie might have cheated on her boyfriend, but is that really a reason for murder? Absolutely not. And what could ever be a reason to murder a pregnant woman? I'm certain that such reasons simply don't exist. And Stephen is a mentally ill person, and he belongs behind bars. Stephen received a life sentence, and I believe that's absolutely just. But I also want to say that Stephen must answer not only to the law, but also to the Lord. Such terrible deeds must be punished with the utmost severity. And that's all for today. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a new video. I'll see y'all very soon. Bye everyone.